kick off today's webinar, just a couple details to go over with you. So as you see, your audio is muted for today's presentation, but there's going to be lots of opportunities to engage during today's session. If you have any questions about the training content, you can enter those into the chat box at any time, and we will do our best to address them as we go. Jessica's really going to want us to be really engaged today, so we really encourage you to have that chat box open and interact as much as possible. Handouts for this training, those were sent out in yesterday's reminder email, but I know we had a couple last minute registrations, or sometimes those end up in the spam folder. So what I'll do is drop the PDF of those handouts into the chat in just a minute. So when you see the file name pop up and you haven't accessed them yet, if you want to just click on that link or click on the file name or the icon, it'll download locally to your drive. Just ping me in the chat if you have any trouble accessing it, and I will make sure we get that handout to you directly. Last but not least, we do have a survey. So at the very end of today's training, you'll see a slide pop up with a QR code. I will also have a browser window that will pop up at the end of today's Zoom. Hopefully you opt in, but it's a 5-question survey. It generally takes less than a minute, but the feedback that you share with us, we really do take to heart here at CEA, and we share the feedback with our partners over at Ventura County. And collectively, we just make sure that we are meeting and hopefully exceeding your expectations with trainings like this, as well as our entire suite of resources available to employers like yourself. So, let's see. Again, today's training is sponsored by Ventura County. I believe we're going to hear from them at the end of today's training, so we hope you stick around to make sure that you are able to learn more about their resources and how to utilize them best in your department and in your small business. So thank you again to Ventura County for sponsoring today and for gathering all these fine people and definitely sharing those small business employer resources with you. So now I'm happy to introduce today's trainer. We are so fortunate to have Jessica Rivera, who is our amazing training and coaching director, to lead us today. And Jessica, it is all yours.
Thank you, Anna. Really appreciate it. And welcome, Ventura County, very near and dear to my heart, born and raised in Ventura County, and still have a lot of relatives there in Ventura County, Oxnard, Santa Paula, Fillmore. So really excited to be here with you today. And just to echo what Anna just shared also about the hotline for all of you, our partnership with Ventura County Workforce Development Board, encourage you, take advantage of the services they provide and take advantage of this hotline when you have a question around human resources, compliance, your people. We are here for you, and we look forward to getting to know you and helping you with your human resources issues that you may have. With that in mind, who we are, California Employers Association, we are a human resources services and solutions organization. We've been around since 1937. We've worked with employers throughout California, also employers outside of California who have a presence here in California. All of us know that California is unique in so many ways, and legislatively, legally, compliance-wise, it's no different. So we are always working with employers. Every single day we get calls, thousands of calls a month, and we support employers in California to solve their human resources, compliance, and issues, and changes in the law, where we can advise of what updates have come into play every year. Additionally, our attorneys make us say we are not attorneys. We don't provide legal advice, yet we do have a staff of human resource subject matter experts who are very skilled and knowledgeable when it comes to compliance, issues around all the things that you face when it comes to things like wage and hour, harassment, prevention training, all of those things we can assist you with and answer questions as you call us. So what are we going to talk about today? Today we'll be spending some time around the 5 generations in the workplace. We know that with 5 generations in the workplace, we have a lot of opportunities to get to know what generations expect, how they work, their preferred method of communication. We'll spend some time on that today. We'll also spend some time on how do we communicate effectively in a workplace that offers us a range of diversity of cultures, experiences, backgrounds, and of course, the generational piece. We'll also talk about creating that inclusive work culture. What we find, and when we talk with employers, when we talk with folks on the ground, they tell us, I just want to be able to feel that my voice matters, that I work for a company that really values their employees. And we'll talk about what that looks like, an inclusive work culture. As we go through the discussion today, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Anna will let me know if there's a question to answer, and I'm happy to do that. And also any other thoughts you may have as we go through the presentation for the benefit of other attendees today. With that in mind, I have a poll for you, and just asking, which generation were you born in as we look at our multiple generations in the house? This is an anonymous poll, and with that in mind, I'm going to launch this, and if you could take a moment and just share with me today where you are in terms of generations today in the workplace. Excellent, excellent. Okay, let me end this and share the results with you. Okay, so as you can see, we have Generation X at 75%, and we have our millennials, which sometimes they combine with X, but we separate it out, and we have 25% there. So we don't have the youngest generation in the workplace with us today, Generation Z, which is coming in fast. And by next year, they're going to be between 25 to 27% of our workplace in the US. So good to know where we are today. And again, as we talk about generations and some of the things that we encounter, please don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the chat box with the others. Thank you. So let's go ahead and take a look at just what the mix is currently when we look at the workplace today. So as you recall, and we're going to go through each generation, but currently Generation Z, which is the generation coming into the workplace today, they are currently at 18% of the workplace. Our millennials, or Gen Y as we also know them, at 36%. Generation X is now a third of the workplace. And interesting, when you look at all 5 generations, Generation X is probably our smallest generation as a whole, but as you can see, at 31% now. And Boomers, as they've retired and they've gone on to do other things in their lives, they're at 15% now. And we're seeing some Gen X's now retiring too. We're starting to see that happening. And then, of course, our traditionalists, which are our more mature, most mature generation at 1%. And so as we look at this, it's really interesting because for the first time in the third quarter of 2023, Gen Z workers in the labor force actually surpassed that of Boomers for the very first time. And as they continue to come into the workforce, we're seeing some things that we as employers need to be aware of and be flexible with and adapt to as we move forward with our companies and the work that we do. So let's take a look at our most mature generation, and we do still have people in the workplace. I recently worked with an employer, and one of their employees, she was in her 80s, and she loved what she did. She did not want to leave. She was vibrant, productive, good at what she did, and she really enjoyed working. And so we still have some of our traditionalists in the workplace. And they may be owners of the business, they may just be subsidizing their income, or they just want to work, they want to stay active. And so as we think about this particular generation, this generation was shaped by the Great Depression and World War II. They were used to listening to radio programs during the war before we even had television. So you can imagine where we are today and we look back at what they were raised with. Also with communications, because they did not have computers at that time, there was a lot of written communication with letters, memos, tangible communications versus our most used method of communication today is via email. And of course, with this generation, a lot of phone and face-to-face interactions for them. So you may find in some of the workplaces with this generation, it might be a more formal type of communication or more of the tangible, or wanting to do phone or wanting to meet face to face. Because back in those days, when they came into the workplace, there were no casual Fridays or some of the workplaces that we see today, open spaces, all of those things. It was a little bit different. So let's take a look now at our baby boomers, which, they're continuing to retire daily. Some are still, a lot are still working because, again, they enjoy what they do, they're good at it. And when we think back in the day, the ages are not what they used to be today. So, for example, when you think of 50, 60, 70, it's very different than our older generations, based on how we continue to be productive, continue to be healthier, all those things that we see in our world today. And so this particular generation grew up with the Vietnam War, civil rights movement, Watergate. Their worldview is really more about achievement comes after we pay our dues. You have to earn this. You're sacrificing for success. All of those things, very motivated by teamwork, company loyalty. You'll note that a lot of boomers had been with their companies for 20, 30 years. They did not leave their companies. They did not go from one company to another on a regular basis. Very, very loyal. Their communication style, again, phone calls and in person, because they believe it's most efficient. And you may run into that in the workplace, where you may be working with different generations, and some are letting you know that their preference for certain things are going to be in person or by phone call, or they may just call you. Some of our youngest generations don't really want to be on the phone for other reasons, yet these generations are very comfortable. That's how they started working and continue to feel comfortable with that method of communication. Also, employers, as you think about if you have boomers in your workplace, empower them as mentors. And when I work with companies and I work with employees, I always say to our boomers also, I say it's great that you bring this wealth of experience, this wealth of knowledge to the workplace, and you're able to impart a lot of this to our lesser experienced workers. Yet I also caution our boomers to be open to reverse mentoring. There's a lot that boomers can learn from our youngest generations in the workplace. And as we expect everyone to be open and willing to learn and grow, we do the same thing with our boomers too. No one ever knows it all. None of us do. And we're constantly learning. Warren Buffett made a great statement not too long ago when he was asked why he was so successful in life. And he said, I always want to go to bed a little smarter than I was when I woke up. And so we're constantly evolving and growing, regardless of which generation we're in. Also with boomers, keep in mind deadlines and goals, very specific. With boomers, when they started in the workplace, what they grew up with is no news was good news, yet I will give you a deadline, I will give you specifics, and I expect you to hit that mark. And even if you did it, maybe ahead of schedule, you may not get all the recognition that you may get today. Yet back in those days, very specific with deadlines and goals for boomers. So let's take a look at Generation X as we look at them. 65, born in 1965 to 1980. They're independent, flexible, skeptical, and informal. And we really owe it to Generation X for their ability and their insistence to have that work-life balance. Sorry to say, our boomers, our traditionalists, did not necessarily have that work-life balance. When decisions had to be made, most of the time, they would make decisions for work and at the expense sometimes of their personal life. But Generation X said, no, we absolutely want to see some balance with our work life. They're also known as the forgotten generation. So as you take a look what they're motivated by, and in addition to work-life balance, diversity and inclusion, making sure that we welcome people as they are coming into the workplace. We embrace the differences. We embrace the diversity of thought, the diversity of education, background, culture, career experiences, and we leverage it in our company to make sure that we get the best of the best from our folks. So they're very motivated by that. Also, when we think about our Generation X, very comfortable with phone calls and in person. Also, remember they were introduced to computers, but at a very early age when we started having computers. So when we think about Generation X, they're also very entrepreneurial, and they're not, they don't hesitate. If things aren't working right, they will walk away from their employers if they need to. They're not as loyal as some of the other prior generations, and especially during that Great Recession that we saw in 2008, they saw a lot of things. They saw their parents getting laid off, parents who had worked for years for their companies when we had so many things happening between 2008 to 2013. Also with this generation, we began casual days and progressive workspaces, and things were a little bit different. The telecommuting kind of started with them a little bit, but it was limited. And with these folks, these workers, thinking about what we have to do as employers, being mindful, flexibility, and work arrangements. Again, they're the ones that started the work-life balance, and it's very different than what it was for the other generations. Also prioritizing personal development. They want to continue to grow and evolve. So keeping this in mind as we take a look at this generation also, and the skepticism also. I happen to have a son who is in this generation, and he does have, he represents a lot of these things that we're talking about here. But our Generation X, they take their vacations, they take their personal lives just as seriously as they take their work lives, if not more so. So let's take a look at our millennials, those born in 1981 to 1996. And when we think about millennials, by next year, 75% of the world workforce will be made up of millennials by 2025. And so keeping in mind this generation, they were shaped by Columbine, they were shaped by 9/11, the internet, the Great Recession. And this is where we start to see a bit of a shift by Gen X into millennials, where they really value quality leaders, and they really value a positive work environment. And also, they're very intentional too with the kind of work environment they want. They're civic minded, and they tend to really care about what's happening in the world, and of course in their own local areas. As with our Generation X, they're likely to leave an organization if it's not working for them. And many of them graduated college during that Great Recession. So they had to take multiple jobs, which began that gig economy where people had a couple of jobs, several jobs, and sometimes they worked for themselves and also worked for a company. So it was an interesting dynamic there. So keeping in mind what they're motivated by, unique work experiences. Managers matter, leaders matter. For those of you who are privileged to lead a team, you matter to these employees very much so. They're responsible. They like to communicate by email, text, direct messages, and also important to them, you get to know them. They want to be seen as individuals. They want to have flexibility in their work, and they also want immediate feedback. And one of the things we talk about around this is the fact that parents who raised this generation and the Generation Z teasingly been called helicopter parents, hovering all of the time. And part of that is that they want to be coached. They don't want to have that old adage, no news is good news. They want to know how they're doing on a regular basis, and they expect ongoing coaching. And as you look at these generations, by being able to engage with them, getting to know them, and provide coaching where they can see a future with your company, that will enhance and improve the chances of them staying with you and creating a career with you. So I want to take a quick look at the chat to see if there's anything here that we need to cover, and I don't see anything. Anna, looks like you're handling that perfectly. Thank you. So with the millennials, again, immediate feedback, getting to know them, and flexibility in the workplace. And now, Generation Z, by 2025, as I mentioned, they will comprise 27% of the workforce. And we already have, if you can believe it, in the US, we already have more than 6,000 Gen Z chief executives in the workplace. And they were born between 97 and 2015. They truly are, in so many ways, are digital natives. They grew up with technology, very comfortable with technology, very comfortable with digital forms of communication. They've told us they're less comfortable with the phone and face to face. And some of them, had to finish college when we were going through the pandemic. So they look at work really in a very different light than our prior generations. And it's as a result of technology, the gig economy, remote work during the pandemic. And it's important to be able to have that diverse work environment and opportunities for training that gives them purpose, because they want to work for employers who make a social impact also. And we hear this time and time again with surveys that we see that are being conducted, research. Also, if you take a look at this graphic, 84% of Gen Z workers expect their employer to provide formal training. They want to continue to grow. They want to learn. So many times I've heard from these workers themselves, these employees themselves, and their leaders, is they're not so concerned about a title. They're concerned with what you as their leader can teach them, how they can grow and learn from you. That's what is most interesting to them. A title is not that most important thing for them. So just because we have a title as a leader, a manager, a director, whatever it might be, you're not automatically going to get their respect because of that title. They want to know what you know, they want to learn from you, and they want to grow. They're motivated by innovation, creativity, that ability to impact things, to have a say in conversations. Also personalization, know me as an individual, cater to what I need, make sure that you don't paint us all with that same brush, that you treat us as individuals. Also, diversity is important to them, and also individuality. So keep it in mind, this generation and their communication style. And this is where we see a lot of issues, because 73% of communication problems are usually as a result of poor communications. When we have issues arise in the workplace, it has to do with poor communication. So their communication is more along the lines of social media, of texts and direct messages. We saw a lot of this recently within the last several months with the election that just concluded, where so much was being done around social media. Also, employers should also be able to give them those opportunities for simultaneous, challenging, unique projects. They want to stay interested, and we need to challenge them to keep them there. Allow them to do independent work. Some of us may have grown up in an environment where we were micromanaged. This generation does not want to or need to be micromanaged, as long as they know what the expectation is and you're confident in their skills, that they have that knowledge to do the job. Also, and again, like with what we saw with X, Y, and of course with this generation, work-life balance. And I hear this a lot. I see this a lot when I work with teams, how important it is to be able to provide that. Whatever it might look like, you still have to run a business. I get that. Yet, how do we provide choices, flexibility, and that sense of them feeling that they have a good well-being, that they have a good balance between work and life? Also, they are progressive, entrepreneurial, and global. They have the world at their fingertips when you think about all the information that's available to them. And this is a really interesting statistic that I came across. And when you're recruiting this generation, when you are looking to replace people who are retiring, leaving your company for other reasons, it is really important for you as employers to talk about the culture of your organization. McKinsey's article on Gen Z, 77% of the people who responded, of Gen Z respondents, they consider work-life balance crucial when considering job opportunities. Now, we're not in a huge fight today as we were a few years ago for talent. There's people out there, yet if you want to get the best talent, if you want to get the brightest of the group, if you want people to want to work for you, it's important for you to be able to convey the culture, the great things about your culture, and a job ad, because you want to be able to distinguish yourself when you're recruiting for this generation and workers coming into your workplace. You want to be able to make it compelling. And we have to think of our job ads now. Our job posting is not what's in it for us as an employer with all the different things we have to have. We have to think about the person reading it, because they're going to have choices and you want them to want to apply for your company. And one of the ways for you to do that is to talk about the great things in your culture, talk about the benefits that you have, talk about whatever it is that makes your company great and works well in your company. Make sure you include that in your posting, in addition to what requirements you need and, you know, those other things, yes. But look at it from the perspective of a job seeker looking at that ad, because I still continue to see a lot of vanilla ads out there. I still do some recruiting consulting, and I see a lot of vanilla ads out there where it's all about the employer, not so much about the person reading it and saying, yes, I want to work for that company. So let me ask you this question too on a poll. Is age just a number? Do you identify with what I talked about with the generation you were born in? So let me go ahead and launch this poll. Give me just a moment here. And if you could take a moment and if you could answer that for me, I would greatly appreciate it. Okay, give everybody a chance to answer this. All right. Okay. So let's take a look. So pretty much, you have absolutely and pretty much, yes, I identify with that. We have one person who mentions not so much, and that's okay too. Sometimes when we're kind of towards almost into one generation, but maybe at the tail end of another, or maybe because of external influences that we've had in our lives, we may identify in different ways. But for the most part, it sounds like people pretty much agree or can see themselves in those descriptors that I provided around the generations. And again, this is just based on research, surveys that have been done, continue to be done. And I expect too, as time goes on, we're going to start seeing some even more shifts moving forward. So this is interesting because when we think about what's important in the workplace, and this goes across, it transcends all generations, is appreciation, recognition for people that we work with as individuals, as well as where they, what they bring to the table, what they bring to the company. So I would ask you just, and feel free to do it in the chat, pick one generation and list those things that you most appreciate about that generation. Some of the things that I've heard when we've done this, either on site or in a meeting or also on a webinar, are things that come up in a couple of the generations that really are profound. And it's things like that work ethic. It's a really strong work ethic. It's also in some of our younger generations, that creativity, that innovation, that willingness to work for a purpose, to be motivated by the, connecting those dots of what I do, how it impacts my company. Also the brilliance of some of our youngest generations because of their exposure to it. Like I said, the world at your fingertips, having so much knowledge about things that they've been able to access over their lifetime. So there's a number of things about generations, each generation, that we all appreciate. So as you think about this, as you reflect about it, think about yourself too. What is it about your own generation that you most appreciate, that you were exposed to, that you have the ability to do things of that nature? And I see someone talks about taking one thing from each generation. Sure, we can take something from each generation too and say, yeah, I can connect with that. Remember, we're all individuals. So when we talk about this in general terms, it's not going to be exactly who you are, but there may be parts of it that are you. Here's one thing that is quite similar though, and really important. And it transcends generations. everyone, all of us, we want to be respected and valued for what we bring to the table, what we bring to our jobs, to the workplace. We want trustworthy and accessible leaders. We want leaders that understand the power of that trust and don't just say I'm available when you need me, but they mean it. And they mean it in a way that they are, when you come to them, you're not feeling like you're interrupting them. And again, I'm not saying sometimes as leaders and as coworkers, we're in the middle of something, but there's respectful ways to say, give me 10 minutes, I'll get right back with you. Or being open, even if someone is coming in to talk with you and maybe you weren't expecting them. But accessibility is extremely important. That relationship is extremely important, especially to our younger generations. Learning opportunities, I've touched on that. Every single one of us wants to have hope. We want to have hope in our future, our careers, all of those things. And so how do we create those opportunities in the workplace? Do we partner people up? Do we assign a mentor? Do we give them opportunities to learn something new? Do we delegate? Do we motivate in ways that we challenge them? So thinking about that for just a moment too, because a lot of folks will say to me, gosh, we're not really growing a lot right now. We're a small company. We don't have a lot of different kinds of positions. Grow people where they are. Grow them where they're planted, as I like to say, so they can be prepared when that opportunity does come up. When you have an ability to give them, to recognize them for what they now bring to the table because they've increased their value. Grow them where they are. That will keep them motivated also. And then feedback. This is so important when we think about feedback because, as I mentioned, our younger generations, starting with Gen X, they're used to ongoing feedback like a coach. They don't want a boss anymore. They want a coach. They want someone that will give them that feedback in a timely manner, consistently, and do it in a way that motivates and inspires. We've all been victims of feedback not particularly well given, provided. So we want to be able to coach them in a way that inspires and motivates them with feedback that looks to the future. Here's what you want to do moving forward. Still talk about maybe where we can get better, of course, but here's what you can do moving forward to enhance those skills or to increase the impact of what you've just, what you're doing. And then again, keeping in mind, I'm talking about generations, yet our individual differences outweigh generational differences. That's why you want to get to know people. What makes them tick, what's important to them. As someone said in our survey earlier, our poll, not so much. I don't equate so much because individual differences, we're all the sum of our experiences, education, career choices, culture, upbringing, all of those things are who we are. So communication in the multi-general workplace, this is where we run into some situations many times, because what happens is in the workplace where people might be really comfortable emailing everything or coming in to see you or picking up the phone or texting or what have you, this is where we see a lot of issues arise, because if you're working with someone who's a maturist, a traditionalist, or a boomer, and maybe you're in the Gen Z category and you're really used to just texting and emailing and getting things handled, and you're texting this stuff, but some stuff we have to think about. Is it better understood if we talk about it, if we meet about it, or if we text or email about it? So thinking about the people that we work with, finding out, having some rules of engagement in the workplace on things that we want to, instill on how we communicate, because everything can't be done by email. We know we're all victims of those email chains that go on forever. We're all victims of emails that we've received that don't really give me a tone or feel of what the intention is of the sender. We're all victims of misunderstanding. So part of this is having conversations with your teammates, talking about what's your preferred method of communication. Yet where are those situations where you're going to make sure that you talk to somebody in person or you pick up the phone? My rule of thumb is if it's going to be more than 3 emails to try to resolve something, I'm going to pick up that phone. I'm going to meet with someone because, ongoing on emails when it's really complex. I don't know about you, but it can be really annoying when you have 100 others you have to get to. So having those conversations in the workplace can be really valuable about your preferences on communications. So as we think about the generations, important to let our younger generations be heard. And sometimes we think, oh, come on, they're heard. We know that happens. They get to share their views. I've been told personally, and I've heard this from my colleagues as well as research, is that some of our youngest generations feel that the weight of what they say is looked at differently than someone else who may be, a boomer or a Generation X. They don't feel that the weight of what they offer is valued as much. So making sure that we allow those opportunities for them to voice their thoughts around something, to use their creativity. One of the scariest numbers that I've seen when it comes to using employees' potential is we only use about 20% of an employee's potential. That's scary. When we think of how much more our employees can offer, how much you can offer, we can offer to our organization, if we don't allow people to be heard, value that, encourage that, create that culture, we're going to be at that 20%. I want to see it at 30, 40, 50%, because imagine the brilliance and the things that can happen when we're able to use people's potential even more than what we are today. Leverage the communication channels. Have some agreements amongst your team too about things that how you're going to do things. Our youngest generation tells us they like the face-to-face. They like the connection with their bosses, with their team workers. Another really big one is listen to understand. And with the 5 generations, it's a perfect scenario for miscommunication or assumptions being made or things along those lines. So really listening to understand, being present in the moment. Ask for feedback. If you're privileged to lead a team, ask for feedback as a leader. The beauty of asking for feedback, if you're trying to work on something or you'd like to get insight, is that you're giving them permission to give you feedback. Don't be afraid of that, because you may hear some things that are really delightful that you're doing very well and you want to keep doing it. You also may hear some things that can make you even more effective as a leader or as a coworker. And then I'm a big believer, clarity is power. When we communicate clear and concise language, and I encourage people all of the time, if you're sending an email and it's got a lot of information, read it and reread it to make sure that the person on the other end or the people on the other end of that email understand what you're trying to say. Some of us are long talkers and we're long writers. Some of us are almost too brief in our talking or our writing. So making sure that it can be understood by the person or the people that you're sending that email to. So let's talk a little bit about an inclusive workplace. As we talk about the generations, as we talk about all of that potential for things to maybe go awry or ways that we can improve it, let's talk a little bit about inclusive workplaces. So when we think about inclusiveness, inclusion, what does that really mean in the workplace? How does that show up? And a lot of it is a feeling for all of us. It's how we feel. I want to know when I work for a company, I can bring me to work, not a modified Jessica who has to change things about myself in order to fit into a culture. I want to bring my whole self to work and have that freedom and that ability to be myself and not have my guard up all of the time. So let's talk a little bit about that. So inclusion it's bringing together all of the diversity, the beautiful diversity and the resources in a way to our company that's really beneficial. Again, bringing up that 20% to 30, 40% when I feel that I belong and I pick the right company. I'm encouraged to speak what's on my mind. I'm encouraged to share ideas. It also puts that concept, that inclusion puts that concept and practice of that diversity by creating an environment of being involved, being respected, feeling good. So even if I say something stupid, I'm offering an idea, hey, maybe that idea is not really good for what we're trying to do now, but who knows? Down the road, it could be. But being respected for even throwing in those thoughts and ideas, and also that connection, connecting to the people that I work with, feeling good about the people that they have my back, I have their back, and we trust each other, which is the foundation of any team that we work with. Making that mix work, all that we bring. Elements of belonging, I touched on that, how important that is for me, but you're seen at work. People see you, they recognize you, they honor you. You feel that you are connected, that you have good interactions with each other, that you laugh. You know, one of the things I really enjoy about being in my office when I'm in the office during the week is connecting with people, laughing with them, breaking bread, having a cup of coffee, because it just gives me more insight to my coworkers. I feel supported at work. And those that I work for, work with, the people I'm privileged to say, and I'm happy to say that they give me what I need to do my work. We work together, we trust each other, we respect each other, we honor each other. And I know if I make a mistake at work, that it's not an end all. It's, hey, I made a mistake. I can admit a mistake. I can say if I need help, I need your insight on this. I need your help. I don't think I can do this without some further resources, but being able to do that is important. And then, of course, pride in your company, pride in the work that you do, pride in the people that you get to work with, and the purpose, the values in your company. Those are all those elements of belonging. And as you look to interview, as you talk with your employees, as you talk with each other, thinking about these elements of belonging. And do we have these in the workplace? Do we talk about them as a team? Do we have opportunities to improve? Are there some things we do really well, we want to keep doing it? Or are there some things that maybe if we tweak it a bit, it can really make that difference for our group? And also understanding we are human beings. Bias prevents inclusivity, and it's unconscious bias. Sometimes we're humans. We make quick judgments about people based on our own experience, our own impressions, and sometimes we have to make sure that we pay attention to that. We've heard things and seen things over the years, even things on resumes. If someone changes their name, they'll get a call because someone may have a name that for whatever reason, whoever's looking at those resumes has a bias towards it. So when we think about our unconscious bias, paying attention to that if it's brought to our attention. So here's some examples. As you can see here, we have just some generational biases that we see all of the time, where we have, here you have blank are entitled and expect to become managers right away. This has been said time and time again about our millennials. And quite honestly, again, remember, individual is more important than overarching generational. We have boomers who have said, this is what they said about us when we were at that age. So it's a bias. Also, blank can barely use a cell phone. They say traditionalist or our maturists can barely use a cell phone. I know a lot of people. I have a 93-year-old aunt who is just a whiz on her cell phone and texts me all the time. So again, some of these biases that we have. And it says here, number 3, blank, they're too reliant on technology. About Gen Z. Really, our Gen Z is also telling us that they want more connection. They want more face-to-face. They want to be on site at work. And then lastly, blank are very close-minded. They say that about baby boomers. They've been around for a long time. They know it all. They're close-minded. Yes, maybe some are, but as a whole, again, people are people. And it's how do we work with each other so we can mentor each other and work with each other in a way that we all feel good and we feel that we belong at our company. Together, we're adding that value to our company. So ways to address biases, things for you to think about. Be more aware of your thoughts and actions. Catch yourself. Sometimes I even remind myself as I'm doing certain things, just that, hey, be aware of how I'm looking at this, because I may have a preconceived idea about something and I could be totally wrong. So making yourself more aware of your thoughts and actions, that's half the battle right there. And avoid making assumptions about others. Can you believe it only takes 3 to 5 seconds to make a first impression when you meet someone? And if it's not a favorable impression, it can take up to 7 interactions that are positive for you to overcome that bad first impression. So we are human, we make mistakes. So be aware of any assumptions you might make without the evidence to back that up. Be flexible in your communication styles and your methodologies in how you communicate with people. Ask people, how do you prefer that I communicate with you? What's the most effective? I do that with new clients all of the time, because if I'm going to communicate with someone, I want a response if I need it. So I want to adapt to my audience. And then a big one, listen more than you talk. We can learn a lot from people about what they say to us if we really listen. In addition, we learn even more about what they don't say. So listening more than we talk. And asking questions, not being afraid to ask questions. Also, when we think about an inclusive culture, is avoid making age-based assumptions or stereotyping. We see that a lot. We hear that a lot, the things that happen in the workplace. People's feelings are hurt. It crosses over into harassment. We want to be mindful of that. Being respectful, flexible, and understanding. Give people grace. We live in a world right now where we don't give each other enough grace, or even ourselves enough grace. Being comfortable in growing people, inspiring them to grow, recognize what their talents are, what they bring to the party, talk about their strengths, and create those opportunities. Find ways in your workplace to be able to create opportunities to strengthen those relationships. This can be very helpful also, especially for our younger generations. They have no qualms if they are not getting what they need at work, or if they're looking at a couple of companies, several companies to work for a company, they need to know and they want to know what they're going to get, because if it's not going to meet their needs, they are not going to hesitate to start looking. And it's important for us to know that that's very different than our more mature generations, to know this. So when we think about onboarding and how important that can be, it's really important to think about how we onboard. It's not a one and done. Onboarding new employees can take months. We've all been new in a job before. We've all been put in a position before where maybe we were onboarded to that company really, really well. Oh my gosh, they did a great job. Versus other companies where here you are, here's your desk, get to work. And you're kind of living in the gray for a while. So thinking about onboarding and processes for your company and how that looks. And here's some things that we suggest to consider as you look at onboarding. Are you flexible? Are you giving feedback? Do you talk about career development? Do you do it digitally? Do you pre-onboard also before someone even comes on board? But take a look at your onboarding process, especially for our younger generations, for a successful engagement with them. It's like anything else, that first impression, they want to know they made that right choice in joining that company. And be able to answer these 5 questions for new employees. We have to be able to answer these. What do you believe at your company? What is, and it's not just citing the mission statement or the values, but what do you believe? How do we treat each other? What are we doing? What's our mission? What's our purpose? And how we look at our customers and how we value our employees. Being able to answer that and talking about it as a leader and talking about it as a team, your shared beliefs, that's important to people coming on board, especially, again, our youngest generations. What strengths do they have? People that you are your employees, what strengths are they bringing to the new role? Talk about their strengths, making sure that you are able to say, you have these, this is why we brought you on board for this role, and this is what we expect from you. But being able to identify what you saw in them and why you brought them on board. Very clear in what their role is. They need to know what's expected of them at work. That is so important for employees coming on board today, because some of them aren't going to be comfortable living in the gray. And when I mean living in the gray, where you can just move forward and figure it out as you go along, some people need very specific, need to have a very specific understanding of what success looks like. I don't want to find out 6 months from now I'm not doing a good job. I want to know exactly what I'm expected to do so I can hit those targets. So making sure that we're able to talk about that. Who are their partners? Who can they count on at work? Who their mentors, their teammates, who can they count on? And then also talking about what their future looks like. And maybe obviously their first day or first 2 days, but as time goes on and they're with the company and you connect with them and you know, have those informal conversations with them, maybe checkpoints during the year, asking, you know, talking about what they want to do. Where do they see themselves? Where do you see them? Every single one of us on this call today, people saw things in us before we saw it in ourselves. So what is it that you're seeing in them? Having that conversation about what they would like to do, where they feel they could really apply their strengths and talents to your organization. And then the benefits of just having that diversity at work, the generational diversity, keeping in mind all of the things that we bring. If we can harness some of that, a lot of that, think about the power that brings and the benefits to your company. It also boosts productivity. When I feel I'm valued, when I feel I belong, when I feel I'm respected, appreciated, boy, I can really do a lot of work and feel good about it. I'm engaged. I want to be there. I'm an ambassador for your company. It also helps with problem solving when issues come up, being able to beat up that problem, but not each other, and make better decisions, and being open-minded, being willing to listen and ask questions as things arise. And then also that foundation of respect. As we think about maintaining a foundation of respect in our workplace, and recognizing that we're all going to bring differences, we're all going to bring different ideas, perspectives, approaches to things, understanding that, you know, we all have a say, our voice matters, everyone has a voice that matters, giving people space to be different. You know, I've worked with a lot of folks over the years in both here at CEA and also in other companies that I've worked with. And I really, you know, I work really hard to get to know people, get their, you know, understand what's important to them and why it matters, but giving people that space to be them and valuing their contributions. I know at my team at CEA that there's some people I can really count on for certain things and others I can count on for other things, but I really value their contributions as a whole. And I don't hesitate to let them know that, because I think it's important to let people know how much you value them. Communicate, collaborate at work, make it a team sport, have some fun also, that's important. And be consistent in how we're treating people too. And then avoid overreacting. Just so you know, if we get defensive about something at work, our IQ actually drops. And I've heard it drops almost 20 points. So we all know that, right? When we get emotional about something, we can't think logically, we can't communicate logically or respectfully. So being aware, if you find yourself in that situation, really listen, ask questions to give yourself time to think through something, or also just saying, gosh, you know, let's talk about this a little bit more tomorrow. Let me think on this, so we don't overreact. And then this is just a recommendation in terms of a great book about bringing humanity into the workplace, how important it can be. Making Work Human by Eric Mosley and Derek Irvine. This is a great book, and it all talks about humanity in the workplace. We need more of this in the world today. And then the last thing I want to leave you with before I turn it back over to Anna is to think about what we've talked about already today. What is maybe one thing that you might take away from our discussion today? And I leave you with this final thought, and it's by Leo Buscaglia, who is an American author. He's not with us anymore, but he was very inspirational, motivational. And he always talked about, to know and not do is not to know. So that means I need to do something with this knowledge. What is one thing I might be able to do moving forward, or it will really have served no purpose? So I encourage you, pick one thing that maybe you look at or you talk about with your team moving forward. And with that in mind, Anna, we have 3 minutes left, so I am going to turn it back over to you and bring us home.
All right, such a pro. Left me more than enough time. Thank you, Jessica, for all of that amazing content and keeping us so engaged. I really do love this training every time I have the pleasure of sitting in on it. So I do want to direct your attention to the screen. We do have the information for that complimentary HR hotline that's available to you at no cost sponsored by the County of Ventura. That is available Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So we really do encourage you to utilize those resources, as well as the entire suite of resources and trainings available through Ventura County themselves. Also in the chat, I did just drop the registration link for the next training that is coming up on December 17th. That is a very popular compliance training, tips for your employee handbook. So especially going into the new year, we really want to encourage you to not just update it, but be aware of the new legalese and protocols. So please come, bring your questions, register for that on December 17th. As you see on the screen also, Jessica has the continuing education credit code. So if you are joining us for HRCI, your code is 683403. If you are joining us for SHRM credits today, or maybe a little of both, 24-HQWS2. Please reach out to us, ceainfo@employers.org, if you have any questions about what to do with these codes or run into any issues with redemption. We are more than happy to help you make sure that you get credit for joining us live today. And then last but not least, I did mention that we do have that survey today. So there will be a link in the chat, or I'm sorry, a browser window is going to pop up. I forgot that I changed up our little way that we do this to make it easier for you all. So after you close out of Zoom today, a browser window will pop up. All you have to do is opt in. Again, it's 5 quick questions. Most of them are multiple choice, but the feedback that you share with us about your time with us today, we share with our partners over at Ventura County, and we hope to meet and hopefully exceed your expectations with trainings like this. So with all that being said, I want to thank Jessica for your time today, for sharing your expertise. Thank you all for joining us live, for being so engaged in the chat and with the polls. And thank you to Colleen, Cynthia, Rebecca, the entire team over at Ventura County for bringing events like this to life. So again, we hope to see you and hear from you on that complimentary HR hotline, and we'll see you December 17th. Thank you again.